Hi, I'm Dan Murch, the owner of Blue Collar Back Office. If you ever felt like you've been flying blind, then this video is for you. Running a business isn't about just getting the job done. It's about knowing the numbers, the structure, the foundation of your business so that you can scale and grow and understand the things that are happening day to day without being involved with them day to day. Had the opportunity today to sit down and talk with one of our clients, Robert Benson. He's the owner, one of the owners of DCM, a very complex and fairly large construction company that operates here in New Jersey. Robert has years of experience in many different areas of the construction industry, many different areas of his business. And we talked today about how, as he was growing his business, how important it was for him to have a handle on what was going on with his finances, understanding how the business operates, understanding the right way to structure and run a project, and the lessons he's learned throughout the years that help them get to the level of success that they have. So take some time, listen to this interview, peel some knowledge from him if you can, because it is a wealth of information that he shares, and it's worth your time.
Good morning, Dan. Thank you.
All right. So let's start off by, I guess, everybody, I make a ton of videos, so everybody knows me and what I'm all about. I'm kind of putting it out there all the time. So tell us a little bit about you. How did you personally and how did DCM get started?
Well, me personally, I'm an engineer and business owner, and we do construction. Uh, I'm a homesteader. I grew up homesteading, and when you homestead, you learn engineering by default. You
Okay.
also learn a lot of chemical engineering, biology, and all these other trades firsthand. So, as a young boy at 5 years old, I was exposed to a lot of hands-on and reactive reactions, right? And you were learning that you always had something to fix. And to this day, I give a lot of conversations with everybody about when they talk about me and how I manage the employees and people and crews and stuff. It always reminds me of all the farm animals I used to have to take care of. You have to manage personalities and come up with ways to sort things out on the farm.
Yeah, it's kind of, yeah, I have no choice.
Yeah, and you really find out how animal husbandry crosses over into figuring out how to get crews to work together, and it's very similar. You'd be surprised how watching the interactions between the people and then watching the interactions of farm animals. We have 15 acres, and we would find the aggressive rooster and the other ducks. They've got 15 acres to walk around, but they end up walking along the same fence line, right on each other all the time. And I'm like, well, same things happen. Guys push buttons on other guys because they just naturally want to be aggressive. And
Hmm.
so you figure out how to separate it and get the most out of people that you need to. And
That's
the
that's quite. I would have never imagined that those two things could end up like, you run a very successful construction company, and you get to do one of the questions I want to ask you is you get to do some really unique projects, and you individually, I like, working with you for 4 years, I've seen that you have a mind for creating something out of nothing. So to think that that came from managing animals is just kind of crazy. You wouldn't really put that together. So how did you end up kind of starting DCM then, coming from that background?
well, starting out of high school, leaving the army, that was 7 years, and then getting into what am I going to do with myself? I found myself getting into refrigeration,
Okay.
HVAC. So from HVAC, that led me to Lincoln Tech, and after Lincoln Tech, that was fun. Getting into a trade school at that time when everybody else was going to college. So after trade school, working in the field for several years, uh, they found that there was a gap between reading blueprints and being good on the hands-on, and I happened to bridge that gap. And I had a lot of the older fellows would come to me and say, "Hey, you're the guy with the math. Come over here. There's this job. We were doing an ice plant called Alaskan Ice, and so some engineer had designed it, and I was figuring out what the engineer drew and all the math, and I was talking to all the workers. So I was leading that crew, and it was just this ability to relax and read the vocabulary and the mathematics of the engineering drawings. So that led me, after a few more injuries on the job, led me to start going to night school for college. I went to college for 8 years at night.
Okay.
In between, I patented an aircraft engine, had a small business, and did that. So that constant motif of invent the solution, right? I was always a believer that somebody had to come up with it first, and we made things. Anything that could be made had to be imagined just to solve a problem. So you have that tractor farm stuff where you're working in the fields again. The understanding of soldering and machining, that's from trade school, and the learning welding, then to fabrication, then to just at this time there was a new program called AutoCAD that was coming out.
Hmm.
So I'd spent my life drafting on hand on full size sheets of paper. And at the same time, I started getting developed. I got asked by AutoCAD to be one of their beta testers. So
Wow.
I developed AutoCAD. In the background of that, I was also developing the new software that was coming out with Windows, and they took the 1977 code for energy building modeling, which was brand new. I mean, which had already been figured out, transfer functions and all that. And I was helping a guy in Seattle who was working with the Department of Energy who was starting to take the old code and put it into Visual Basic. And I'm like, well, I love computers, love doing that. So he and I developed a dialogue. And so then I started as a refrigeration mechanic, showing him my side of the fence. And we were then putting the energy code. That later became a program that Carrier came up with called HAP, Hourly Analysis Program. And it used the NOAA databases. So you had this moment where we had computing power. We were suddenly able to take all the NOAA weather data
Hmm.
and building arrangements and HVAC calculations and put them into programs. So all those things just happened to happen at the right time for me. And that was because I was mathematical and hands-on.
Right. And you
And
also have the personality where you don't take a roadblock and stop, right? Like from working with you and from everything you just said, you can tell
yeah,
like you have an idea and you see it all the way through the end, no matter what you have to do to get to it. And I think that's really important. So,
yeah.
that's awesome. So how did, Eduardo's your business partner. We've talked, I know Eduardo very well, and we were just talking about him a little bit before the interview we started. So how did you and Eduardo kind of get together and decide to start this business together?
Well, what happened was working on getting that engineering degree. I was working for an engineering company. So I transitioned formally. I graduated from college and now I have the engineering degree, the bachelor's. And I started working on school design. Well, this was a boom in the industry. The New Jersey School Construction Corporation was formed. And Eduardo's company was DCM. He worked for them. And I worked for the Da Vinci Group, which was an excellent engineering firm out of Woodbury, very small group. And one of the new requirements was the green building design. People were interested in green buildings. And as it happened, I'd been writing green energy analysis, and that got picked up. So Eduardo was working for an architecture firm who had hired our engineering firm, and they were designing pretty interesting schools, and they were doing a lot of retrofit. And how do you retrofit within budget? And that's where I kind of came in.
Right.
Was they had a budget? I forget, it was, let's say it was $1 million, and they had an allocation on the budget for I think it was $300,000 to upgrade the electrical service for the school that Eduardo was designing. So I looked at that 300,000 to upgrade the electrical service. Why? Because the building didn't have air conditioning. So I plugged it into my modeling software and I said, well, if we change this to geothermal and use energy recovery wheels, the geothermal field was 200,000, the energy recovery wheel was 100,000. These were expensive pieces of equipment at the time. I said, you don't have to upgrade the electrical service. because you're going to use so much less energy. The electric service that's existing will work.
Hmm.
So that was my, bouncing these things off, saying, look, uh, you have a budget to upgrade the electrical service, but if we just make the building more energy efficient, you won't use the electricity. So we went full LED lights, was a new thing at the time.
Hmm.
And we were able to show it and get the bond and get the everyone to see it because we had the software. Well, Eduardo and all those guys supported me. A lot of architects were gun shy. They didn't want to do anything. So Eduardo had two partners, and they were 15 years his senior. And I had decided I was going to move on from the Da Vinci Group. And I told Eduardo on the ride back on the New Jersey Turnpike. And he said, we didn't hire the Da Vinci Group because we wanted the Da Vinci Group. We hired the Da Vinci Group because we heard of you.
Hmm.
So I thought, well, okay. So they asked me to come by that place that night, their place. So I went to their office for the first time that night. And that's when they said, hey, why don't you come work directly in our office? Since you want to leave that other group, you work here and you'll be autonomous. So I did. So I started working with them at DCM Architecture. And it was kind of, that was the introduction. You know, we evolved from there. I met a super dynamic person at DCM Architecture. Her name was Erin.
Hmm.
And so there was the beginnings of the group.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. And you guys, working with the three of you, and then the other people on your team, you guys really complement each other well, in terms of your strengths and kind of what you do. So what's a little bit of the dynamic there in, at the top in terms of, is there kind of a path that Robert's in charge of this, Eduardo's in charge of this, Aaron's in charge of this, or do you guys just really all just collaborate and just naturally kind of flow to your strengths?
I think we definitely have lanes.
Hmm.
Uh, we definitely are stronger as the group, even though either one of us could have a solo album.
Right. Right.
There's something that happens that's how it happens, right? There is something. Now, the easy on the surface things, you could say Aaron takes care of the business, Eduardo is the CFO planner, and I'm the executor. There's a lot of ways to look at it. I'm not really sure, but I'm a big fan of not uh, of checking your ego. You know,
Hmm.
if you don't realize that um, working in a vacuum, it's limiting. It does limit you. I think one of my favorite things is I get to be. I like to call myself, the rogue on the independent. Well, I have to have partners who keep me in line
Sure.
because otherwise I'll end up like so many of my friends. I have a very talented welder. He's a fantastic fabricator welder. He understands his trade, and he's stuck. And he's like, I have so many jobs. I said, well, yeah, no one went to business school, right?
Hmm.
We were all fabricators or tradespersons, and then we ended up opening a business. And once you open a business, and once it starts to take off, it's a different set of skills.
Yeah,
And
for
he
sure.
doesn't have any partners, and he's afraid to give up control because he believes the entire business runs on his quality, and that's not how business actually works. It's very tempted to say, oh, look, I am Ferrari, I make the best cars. No, you make keychains, sneakers, you do a lot of other things that allow you to make cars.
Right,
uh,
right. It's
so if you
it's
don't
funny.
have partners, something's getting neglected.
Yeah, yeah. And people that, like you said, hold you in check, right? Tell you like, hey, listen, at the end of the day, you're the owner, you can do what you want, but here's where I think it could go wrong for you. And at least somebody that's giving you an honest opinion and not just telling you what you want to hear all the time. And it's funny, most of our clients that we work with are that kind of client, right? Smaller business, the owner's wearing every single hat, they're doing everything themselves, and the
Right.
control thing is a big issue, right? So it's so much of their blood, sweat, and tears that went into building it to all of a sudden have somebody else giving them input or having some kind of control, whether it's real or perceived, is really scary.
Right.
So you guys are going to be 20 years old next year. You guys got a big anniversary. So by the time we started working together, you were already very well established and, had a full team and foundation and kind of already found to a certain extent your niche for the type of work that you guys do really well, and everything else like that. So tell me a little bit about, I guess this is the commercial segment of the interview. Tell me a little bit about, how you found us and, if there's anything that you've noticed in terms of a change between before working with Blue Collar and, since we've started working together.
So I'll tell you what we found you. What we found was we found that there was a lack of knowledge. We had internal bookkeepers, and because I was always in the field and I was the one generating a lot of the invoices or the expenses, I should say, they were going into an ether. On top of that, Eduardo is a architect. He's very visual. Things are in his head, and getting the information from him was always lagging. Erin, who is always the one being told we need to know where we're at, and she would try and do the bookkeeping. We were going through a lot of, for years in the beginning, it was fine. We had somebody who had been with us. As a design firm, she was only having to track design contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And then construction started coming in, and it was a bit of a nightmare for her, but I would always meet with her and bring her up to date. And we were operating on a cash basis, and we were operating without a line of credit. And we were doing millions of dollars worth of work on a cash basis with no line of credit. I kept going into QuickBooks myself, started going into the software, and I couldn't find anybody who spoke construction and accounting and bookkeeping. They were always interested in the wrong thing for me. I was always interested in just get everything in the same category, and you'll develop the patterns.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens. You become aware the more complex the network is. And I met Blue Collar because I was interviewing bookkeeping software companies. I said, first off, we've tried this in-house, and it's burdensome in-house. I want to be able to give clear instructions on what I'm expecting, and I showed the weekly things that I look at, the key indicators of performance. When I met Blue Collar, first thing I noticed was they had heard of construction and they did bookkeeping. The vocabulary is very important.
Mm-hmm.
The understanding of the ebbs and flows, and also the temperament. Like all these numbers, if you look at them, they're daunting, but then you put them in where they are in category, but what it meant more is in time.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at numbers always as snapshots, and Blue Collar understood that there's a flow here. It's going to be hit, and then it's going to come down. There's a reason. Marketplace and business, when you watch those shows, they have a certain temperament, and I found that you had that temperament. You looked at it as, yep, this is where we're going. This is what's going to happen, and it was always fun to have the dialogue. To say, I'll pick up the phone and I'll tell you this is what I feel is going on, and you'll be like, yeah, that's where it is, and that's that market conversations. You don't have to have the exact numbers, but you have the market. But the organization that we have now was being able to put it into a repeatable thing, mm-hmm. where I could train up people. So once again, I was observing the people in the office and figuring out with you how to train up them. And that's growing your business. Mm-hmm. If you don't have something that stabilizes the information flow, such as QuickBooks Online, where it's being managed by bookkeeping, what happens is, since you're doing it the way that a contractor needs to, it's not a bunch of receipts going into columns that don't make sense. So that's a huge thing, that it's like a subtle thing, but if you were taken into project management software, you are the project management software. Blue Collar and Dan are the project management software of the bookkeeping. When you go in and you standardize something such as submittals, drawings, or RFIs, or any of the things that you see in project management software. Why did project management software become so important? Because employees can no longer just go into Windows, if you're doing everything in Windows, you can create a new folder, create a new folder, create a new folder, and you put it where you want it, and you have a ton of data and don't know where it is.
Right.
Anything is. Blue collar back office takes all of our financial information and we can't put it in the wrong place. So it's always going in the right place. So that means when I want to stop doing what I'm doing, because I'm doing a million things, Eduardo's doing a million things, Aaron's doing a million things. When we're doing a million things in the background, when we decide we can catch our breath, let's go look at where we're at. How are the jobs doing? You've already put everything where it belongs, and it's the truth. The
Hmm.
truth is the interesting part because a lot of people were putting it in guesswork columns and just like, oh, maybe this goes here. They would just bookkeepers would reconcile books. They're just their mentality is reconcile everything, reconcile statements, reconcile it. Doesn't tell you what's happening to this job. This job moves around. So we knew when we met you, you were the piece that was missing for that component of the whole machine.
Hmm.
It made sense that we have a lot of information. We want it presented to us a certain way, and we don't want people to be able to put it where they think they want to put it. And you and I have gone through some evolution of the chart of accounts and
Hmm.
understanding how important the chart of accounts is. Now, how does that communicate to raising employees? When you're raising the employees, they think about the world a certain type of way. But now they get both the budgets versus the buyouts. And now they know they can go shopping and they don't have to wait for permission. So, not making it so that you're a funnel organization. My very good welder friend, he's making everybody comes to him for permission.
Yeah. Choke
Everyone.
point.
That's
Yeah.
a choke point. It's terrible. So, if you've got guardrails in place, like your bookkeeping is in place, then your project management is in place. If a job's not doing well, okay, that's the market. You don't lie to yourself. You just say, okay, that job's not going to do well.
Right.
That's the way it's going to go.
Right. Yeah, I think you and I are very similar. And I think one of the reasons why I truly enjoy working with you a lot, and I've learned a lot from you over the last 4 years, is kind of the operational structural way that we think, right? So for me, for anything I recommend to any of our clients that are running small $5,000 projects to a company like you who's running a $16 million project, is process and procedure matters. And the
Yep.
easier you make something, the more repeatable it is, and then it becomes your habit, and then it's not such a big lift, right? So you talked about like training employees and getting them up to speed. Like at first it's awkward, and at first like it just feels like something annoying to do, but then the more they do it, they see it's really not that difficult, and being able to see the benefits of it, of as the job is going on, seeing how it's progressing, and identifying red flags 3 months into a 12-month project instead of 2 months after the project is ended, the difference that it can make in terms of how you proceed. Like sometimes, like you said, the numbers are what they are. It is what it is, but at least you kind of know it now and you can make adjustments or, make a change in your budget, how you're going to handle a certain portion of the project, like you're doing, like with some of the boiler projects you have right now. And so just having that, availability to it, I think really makes a difference. And you, more than probably any of our clients, understood that right from day one. Like that was the main thing you wanted. You wanted more visibility on your projects as they were happening, as opposed to with what a lot of small businesses care about is, hey, do I have enough money in the bank? Like, and
Yep.
like you were always more kind of drilled in. So was that for you something that you knew right from the get-go when you started the company, or was there like a epiphany at some point where you're like, hey, I need to be more granular, or did you just always know that?
I think as an engineer,
Yeah.
I knew processes and from modeling things, from modeling software, from aviation flight control systems to um, building thermal envelopes and energy. Anytime you're modeling a system, you need the data to go where the data belongs in order to get the output. Garbage in, garbage out. Right. If you're just doing bookkeeping and you're just trying to focus on payroll, I've done that. It's not a place you want to be, but you're not going to know what your business is doing.
Mhm.
So training up people in a network allows me to not choke them off. They can run the jobs. The jobs are being run their way, the way we've got it, right? What else does that produce? That produces a communication circle between those three people who are training themselves up. They don't want to always come to me and ask about the business flow. how to prepare payment applications, how to do a schedule, how to do schedule of values, because they can talk to the counterpart when they're running a project on how much things cost when they're doing the schedule of values and how they're going to bill the client. And they have the backup for that. But instead of just coming to me and me telling them, I've told them this is the system. I have them seated on the same tables facing each other, right? I have them physically in the office facing each other to create conversations. And so they're being taught business,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if they're going to be taught the system has to be true. And they see the reality of numbers, that some things work out and some things don't. One of the things I like about having all the information at my fingertips is I know how to look at a job and the dollars, and I can tell certain behavior. I can tell what that job is doing just by looking at the numbers. If I see we have a line item of labor for 500,000 and we're 50% through the job and we've only spent $120,000, that's a red flag, right? We're supposed to be done the job and we haven't started. That means we're going to be late. What else is going on in that job? So being able to analyze data and equate it to human behavior or projects, productivity, you start to see the value of that component of running a business. And again, when you want to run a business, you better be able to take yourself out of it. Then you know you've made a business, right? You can have a practice, you can have a partnership, or you can have a business. A business is something that should make money without you there. We all know, like, okay, we're the key components that created the business. But if you didn't create it so that you can't be there, then you didn't make a business, you made a practice.
Yes. Yeah, that's such an important distinction. And I think a lot of people using the example that you use, and there's plenty of examples I could give, right? It's the choke point, it's that person's the anchor. And if they're removed, what happens, right? And that's not only good, that's bad for financially and everything else like that, but it's also just from an individual perspective, right? That puts so much pressure, so much stress on just that one person. Because no matter how big you grow, you could have 10, 12, 30 people working for you. If you're the choke point of it, then everything falls on you, and that's a lot to carry. And there's no way for you to keep maintaining that same level of performance the bigger you get without letting go and empowering the people on your team like you do.
Right. Well, when you also run things, like I run things as squads, platoons, and companies, right? They're usually, back in the day, it was multiples of 4, right? A squad is 4 people. A platoon would be 16, company would be 4 times that. If you don't create that command structure, then there's nothing to lead. Then you just have a whole bunch of people down here. They also have to have their own group think going on. Otherwise, you can't send them to execute, right? So I put different groups together and I can bring in a force multiplier. So I can have someone, like, let's say this job is having this squad of people working on it. And it could be a subcontractor, or it could be our own in-house. There are some key people that I know, if I take them, they go in and that's a force multiplier, and then they start moving that ball forward. So you create these, you find out who your leaders are, and you don't have them burned out on tasks. You've heard me talk about having Dave Hamilton as a road superintendent. And that's because he pushes, and he also understands big picture. And when you have rotation of people, they have fresher eyes. So I have superintendents, and you have a superintendent sitting on a job site. He's going to always be looking at the world through that eye set.
Right.
The road superintendent is the only one that's the same rank as the site superintendent. And so they have different conversations than the workers. And for a second, he gets to check whether or not all the things he's assuming, sometimes it's venting, sometimes it's just checking. And maybe I need a task, I can hand it off to him because he knows what I have to do and he can hand it off.
Right.
So you get that constant refresh rate of having the road superintendent touching all the superintendent jobs. And then his job, he comes back to me. And he then talks to me about how they're all doing. and we
Right.
and we can make adjustments. So
And then it's a fresh set of eyes across the board, right? Because,
right,
the super that's on the job, lost in that world, seeing that, Dave sees it a little bit of a different way, brings it back to you. Maybe you even see it a little bit of a different way. And
right,
because it's fresh, you're always getting kind of the best path forward because fresh
yeah,
minds and everything.
right. And then I'll have the information there for to know which job needs support more, which needs more focus. I can also get from that intel what's going on the management level, project managers. Maybe these guys are not communicating, and I can tell just by talking to this one, and this one.
Hmm.
So
Which
bring them
makes
in together, restart the job, work, restart, rehash out,
hmm.
and then make decisions. Don't hold up $1 million invoice because you're fighting over $10,000 worth of work.
Right, right. So one of the things that you've brought up, and it's the first time that I heard one of my clients mention it, and I love it, and I've used it many times in the past. I've stolen it from you, is what you like to call your virtual board of directors. So I'd love for you to just explain a little bit what you mean by that and kind of how you develop that in your brain, because I think for a lot of small business owners, I think it's a really important concept for them to get to help grow their business and understand kind of the path forward.
Right. So when we were developing our business, we wrote down organization charts because we said, okay, we're starting to do jobs. Let's talk about resources. And out in the background was all the things that make you a business: your insurance brokers, your bonding companies, your CPA, and that's when you realize, okay, I'm not just making buildings. I have a whole industry, and that's often was the way your client looked at the world, because your client didn't hire you to do a renovation; they hired you to do this project, and in that project were all these soft costs.
Mhm.
So when I started looking at the company and finances, I would look at the soft costs, and I realized there's a lot in there, right? But this is
Yeah.
what allows us to do the business. And we were always very, I think, very transparent with our bonding company and with our CPAs and our insurance writers what we didn't know. You know, they knew everything because that's what they did all day long. Their vocabulary on insurance is the most boring thing. I would never want to learn it,
Right. But it's important.
but it's important. And if you're spending that much money on it, you better get them directly connected to you instead of you being just a customer. We wanted them to be a part of the company, and we wanted them to want to. We wanted to be their best client. So in order to do that, you make them have ownership, and you
Mhm.
start calling them a part of the board. And it is a reality that we realized, like, you have the presidents, you have the directors, but you have these other without these other positions, there is not a business. It doesn't exist. Well, who are the head of those things that we're not doing anything with? It was the insurances and the bonding and the banking. So we would make the banking companies. So we had an interview from our surety, and we told them that we believe you're a partner in the business, and they were very, they could see that we understood business. We weren't just asking for the piece of paper.
Mhm.
We wanted to understand their side of the business. We wanted to know what they looked at. We wanted them to report to us what they saw. And by doing that, you have a division and you have a division report.
Mhm.
And now the other, captains and majors are now getting the information, and it all goes downhill from it gets disseminated from there. But without having blue collar being a part of the board of directors, we wouldn't get the information on what you're seeing. I mean, you have so much information at your disposal. I need that summary.
Mhm.
Well, we need to have that summary. And where do you do that? You do that in a boardroom, right? You get together with your board and you have meetings. You have board meetings. Isn't that what businesses do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So we have board meetings. We get together with you and the CPA. We get together with the insurance company and everyone, and not just in time. over the course of the year
Hmm.
so that you can do projection, so that you know where you're at. Um, if you realize that all those components are costing a lot of money, they should be giving you direction. They shouldn't be just invoicing you.
Right.
And you're the entrepreneur. That's how you started the business. So we love information, entrepreneurs, right? Because we look at all information through our filter, and we say, how much risk can I take?
Hmm.
Because they're going to tell me not to take any.
Right.
And now I need to know how to know what their pain point is, so that I can massage it, so that I can get what I want out of them. But the business picture is all those things that you're not interested in, right? I'm interested in the system. I love the engineering system of business, but I also do fabrication and some other things here and there. But by walking both sides of the fence as contractors and engineers, we have a certain in, right? We can talk to management, we can talk to the contractors. Well, by learning all the other aspects of business, which I had no idea we were going to have to do, and that's another perspective, which I think is very funny, is we do a lot of work in foreign countries, and what you do in this country for to be an American business and what you can do in Cozumel are two slightly different things.
Mm, mm. Yeah,
So
different playing field.
different playing field.
Yeah, different playing field.
Yeah.
So what's really unique about you guys is like you really do have this synergy going back to the virtual board of directors where you have a bunch of different people all pulling in the same direction, right? So, as you said, I have a relationship with the people that from your bonding company and your insurance company and the bankers and the CPA. And, so when somebody needs a piece of information, it's not getting choked off in your
Yep.
office. Like everybody knows who they have to communicate with. And more than probably any of our other clients, you are and your team, Eduardo, Aaron, Renee, everybody, really proactive about wanting to discuss information, wanting to review what's happening with the business. We meet at least every other week. And there's always meetings kind of sprinkled in between. Like you said, we have regular meetings with the CPA team, regular meetings with the banking team and the insurance team. And I think for a lot of small businesses, it can change from being like you said, it's some of this stuff's expensive and it's no fun to have to pay for it, but it can transition from being just another bill you have to pay that you're annoyed about to being somebody that really is an ally that can help you in your business, right? Because
Right.
I don't know, I know a lot of people and I know a lot of people in a lot of different businesses, but I don't know everybody. But I know if I reach out to you, you know a lot of people too. And you just start building this network of people that can help you as opposed to just being annoyed by the bills you have to pay and not getting the benefit of it. Then you're just paying it out and you're not getting any of the reward. You and DCM, you really make sure that you get the benefit of it. And I think that's really helpful for a lot of small businesses.
Yeah. Networking is the unintended consequence of the desire to know, right? You start asking questions, and then suddenly you get introduced to someone else,
Hmm.
and then you really start to see how this whole system is run. And when you talk to a client, the way you can talk up to a client, so uh, someone with a brand name like Hilton, this is all they know,
Mm.
right?
Right.
You realize that they appreciate that you can do all the things that you do in building: big diggers, concrete, pipe, drywall, aesthetics, all that. None of that happens unless it's a business. They're not going to weigh in with you, no matter how awesome your idea is or how good your presentation was. We used to do in the early days of DCM, we would do go for school work. And at the time, there was the green building design. Everybody was talking about green building. They would do presentations, and they were done by architects to school boards. And I remember seeing all the diagrams of all the guys who would come before us. And I did my green building design. I did a giant spreadsheet. And I said, I'm not going to bother explaining to you all about desiccant and wheels and industries and things. I said, here's the spreadsheet. And here's how the money flows by the investment, and here's the return on investment. And these are all backed up. And I was talking to them about ROI and how the cash flow was going to work. And that was my green building presentation. And we won so many jobs because they looked at us and said, they're not just designing something because they want to see it built with our money.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, this is how they said their budget would work. This is how they said it would flow. And at the end, I said, oh, by the way, it's going to meet all the requirements that your school is looking for. That's all they wanted to know, those answers. But what was the most important thing they wanted to know was how can I bet on you
Mm-hmm.
versus this other big firm, these other big firms, we all know them, but we don't know you. And they looked at our numbers and we would submit them the numbers. And that was when they could put their weight behind us as a selection. Right. And that was really important to learn. That why did we learn all that? Well, that's the business side. Who are you going to do your presentations to? Business people. Who's going to have the money? The business person. When you look at the federal government, I think it's the 527.
Mm-hmm.
527 is the government's way of checking out whether or not they can give you a contract because they want to know whether or not you're a stable business.
Right.
How do you know if you're a stable business? Well, I've been in business. No, you've been sweating it out and slugging it out, but we don't know if you're
doing a lot of jobs, but are you actually in business? Yeah.
Yeah. Are you in business?
I'd like to end with one last question, kind of a peek into the future. Besides getting yourself a little bit of a break from the way you've been kind of burning it at both ends, as we talked about, what is kind of your goal, I guess, for lack of a better word, where you kind of envision DCM moving over the next 5 years or so?
Well, I'm not sure. For me personally, I think I'd like to retire.
Okay.
I don't think that there's going to be somebody who replaces us. So there's a business that's there to be run, but that's not really that interesting to me. What happens beyond, the next 5 to 10 years, I'm going to be in my 60s. And one of the things I have already started telling everybody is, even some of the employees. So I'm 55. I said, I need to close the business within 5 years because it'll take 5 years to close the business anyway. And nothing ever gets done on time. So 5 years will be 7 years,
right?
10 years. Well, I've seen a lot of businesses where there's an older person in the office, still going to the office, keeping everything running. And that to me was bad planning. So when you plan to start the business and you run the business, you need to plan the exit.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, I think it's smart to be planning the exit well in advance of having to. Because if you start planning the exit, you can then figure out, is one of those plans to hand it off to make it an employee-owned company? If it's an employee-owned company, how's that structure going to work? Since we have this business and it's repeatable, is there anybody to take it over?
Mm-hmm.
It's a generational thing right now. I don't see a generation of personnel that has this entrepreneur gut. And I think they all just want to work in a business where somebody else is making it. We've been waiting and waiting for that person to emerge, but that has not happened. So if that's not going to happen, then you have to conclude that the business has to close. Because without the Aaron, Robert, Eduardo figureheads in the business, then who's making the decisions?
Right. Who's steering the ship?
And we're very open, but we don't see it. We don't see it. And if you were to sell the company, who wants to buy a construction company? It's just another construction company. So I think that it's smart to figure out what are your options if you're going to close, because at 65 you shouldn't be doing this. Right. So if you're 65, you shouldn't be doing this. If you are there at 65, you should just be a consigliere, or you should just be a figurehead. By then, the people have emerged. And I even look at the demographic of all the people that work for us. Obviously, the construction type people, they're transient by nature. So I'm not really thinking that I have to worry about them because they're tradespersons. When I look at project managers and other persons, well, they want to be just working for somebody. Well, they're going to have the resume of a lifetime. So I don't have to really worry about being an employment agency for these people.
Hmm. You're
But
giving a foundation for the future.
yeah, and if there was a clear transition that said, no, there's clearly a path that these employees would be the new trio. So if we're doing this over the next 5 to 10 years, that new trio will emerge.
Right. Okay. Well, not surprised to hear that you have a plan and that you're planning in advance because that's kind of who you are.
Yeah,
And we're gonna have to do this again sometime because we didn't even get into your passion of building cars and all the other stuff that's just really interesting and unique about you. But Robert, I really appreciate your time. Really appreciate you doing this. We will definitely circle back. And it's been awesome working with you. Honestly, it's been really kind of changed the trajectory of our company and changed the trajectory for me, opened me up to learning a bunch of different things and learning from you, like I said. So I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity that we've had. And I look forward to being with you for however long the wind down is part of. So,
it's very good partnership. So, and it's the fun part is when you get relationships
absolutely.
and you get different personalities. And you and I are so similar. We pick up. I didn't make a phone call meeting. I didn't make the Friday meeting. I do my check in with you. I already know the 3 or 4 things that you're worried about because
Hmm.
I worry about the same 3 or 4 things.
Right. Yeah. It's been a good mix and I appreciate it.
All right, Dan.
All right. Thank you.
See you, bud.
Bye.